What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. In today's episode, I'm going to be going over the most important results from Tuesday night, the College Football Playoff Week 1 rankings, the first iteration of the 12-team playoff. Before I get into that and give my thoughts on some of the decisions by the committee, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But running through it, I have the graphic up here, but I'm going to go through it just kind of one by one. In the number one spot, unsurprisingly, is Oregon. They're the highest ranked conference champion going off of the, just the rankings right now. I'm not giving my projections. That will be coming shortly. But in this video, just kind of giving my rundown of the decisions by the committee. So Oregon's number one. I think that's the right pick there. Ohio State is at number 2. That puts them at number 5 in the bracket, the 5 seed. I think that is the right decision. Now, if you've watched the channel for a while, you know that I do lean towards the Buckeyes. I would say I am obviously a fan. I grew up in Ohio, but I think their win, based on the rankings, doesn't quite stack up because the committee actually has Texas ranked ahead of Penn State, but their loss is better. And that was one thing that the chair of the committee, I think Ward Manuel is his name, the AD at University of Michigan, he said that was part of the deciding factor. One thing the pundits on ESPN's breakdown said is that Ohio State, this is what Reese Davis specifically said, is that Ohio State's looked more impressive week after week, I would say, aside from the game against Nebraska, which is what Booger McFarland talked about. Then coming in at 3 is Georgia. Coming in at 4 as the number 3 seed is Miami. I think the Hurricanes are deserving of that spot. However, it does kind of introduce a question I'll talk about a little bit later in this video. Why are the other teams that have played similar schedules, yes, they're probably a little bit worse, but why aren't, I'm going to talk about it right now, why aren't Indiana and BYU ranked higher than? Both of those teams have the same record. I would probably agree that their schedules are a little bit weaker even than Miami's, but I think both of those teams are deserving of being higher up, and they were pretty low in these rankings. Then coming in at 5, I think as the 6th seed is Texas. And then coming in at number 6 as the 7th seed is Penn State. I would probably agree that they should be ranked behind Texas. Here is where 8 and 9, though, I disagree. And it's where I think maybe Indiana should be one higher. But when you're comparing two teams in the same conference that haven't played each other, it comes down to one loss versus no losses. Maybe that should be the deciding factor, but I think certainly Indiana should be ahead of Tennessee. I know Tennessee has had overall a good season. They've been winning games, but I think Indiana is more deserving of being ahead of them, and again, debatedly, maybe even in that spot ahead of Penn State. Then coming in at number 9, those last two teams I said are 7 and 8, and 8 and 9 in the seeding. Coming in at number 9 in the rankings is BYU. I think having them ahead of Boise State is the right call. They have a couple of impressive wins, including against the first team out, number 13 SMU. So I think that's the right call there. I do, however, think Boise State is probably deserving of being ahead of Notre Dame. When you're comparing both of their losses, yes, Notre Dame's wins over Navy and Louisville are probably slightly better. I think Boise State's loss is a much more quality loss, obviously, to Oregon on the road in a game that they competed with the Ducks for a good part of it. So I think that is a discrepancy here. They have Boise State at 12. I would probably put Boise State right behind BYU at number 10 in the rankings. The Cougars obviously are the number 4 seed. But Boise State is not far. That's a three-spot ranking separation between those two teams, so I think that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Then you're looking at Notre Dame at number 10, Alabama at number 11, and the aforementioned Boise State at 12. SMU is number 13. Texas A&M was number 14 as the second team out. And then an interesting thing is I think LSU was number 15 and Ole Miss was 16. I love that they stuck with the head-to-head in those rankings. LSU beat Texas A&M and Texas A&M beat LSU. LSU beat Ole Miss. So those teams are in the right order, and obviously it sets up for a big game. I'm going to get into my preview in a separate video. This is just a short breakdown, my thoughts on the rankings. In my last video that I'll have linked at the end of this one, I gave my rankings. I think, like I said, Indiana probably should be a little bit higher, maybe 1 or 2 spots, and I think Boise State should be as well. I think I probably agree. I mean, if I'm going to argue that Indiana should be higher, then I probably should say that BYU should be higher as well. So I'm gonna kind of adjust my rankings, and I'm gonna put Oregon at 1. I'm gonna put Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3. Then that would be Miami at 4. So you've got Oregon, Georgia, and Miami as the 3 conference champions, highest ranking. Then behind Miami, I would put Texas. I'm going to keep Penn State ahead of Indiana because I think Indiana will have a chance to prove themselves by how they play against Ohio State. That game's in Columbus. I think if they keep it as close as Penn State did, it's tough to see them jumping the Nittany Lions, but I think they'll be right there with Penn State if they can keep it like within a score. So I'm going to go with Indiana just behind Penn State. So I guess I don't have as much of a problem. I think they should be ahead of Tennessee still because I think obviously Indiana doesn't have a loss. Penn State's is a very quality loss, so I think that kind of stacks up all right. And then behind Tennessee, I'd probably actually bump BYU ahead too, have Indiana and BYU back to back. And then I would slide in Tennessee, and then behind Tennessee is probably where I would have Boise State. I think their separating factor is the strength of schedule, even though Boise State's loss is better than Tennessee's. That's how I would stack it up. Plus, Tennessee has some good wins to bolster their resume, including against Alabama, who I'd probably have. That's a tough one. Alabama and Notre Dame, I think, is also an interesting debate. Kind of going through this in my head, I have more, just spot-by-spot debates than I did going into filming this video. I think Notre Dame and Alabama is a very interesting debate for what would be the 10 or 11 spot. And then that would put kind of, I think, A&M and LSU in that discussion as well. Alabama, LSU, talked about it already. That's going to be a playoff decider. So, a lot to talk about. I think Boise State is probably in the right spot, but they've put themselves in a position where if BYU slips up, they're going to have a chance to jump in. And SMU, if they can win the conference, has that same opportunity. But the Mustangs at number 13 are also in a good spot for getting into the playoff as an at-large. If one of the teams that's ahead of them slips up, they're going to be in a favorable position, even if they lose to potentially to Miami in the ACC championship game. But that's my rundown. I know it's probably a little bit all over the place, but those are my thoughts on the first iteration of the college football playoff rankings. But if you stuck to this point in the video, thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.